Hello and welcome to Asia Gaming Brief's face-to-face series. Today I'm talking with Daniel Cheng. He's a long-time executive in the casino industry and was recently leading Hard Rock's efforts to enter the Japanese market with a particular focus on Hokkaido. While he was there, he got the inspiration for a book about the native people in that area and their opposition to a big IR casino development coming in, which obviously has certain reflections on real life in Japan. So he's talking to me today about his new book and about the whole process towards IR regulation in Japan. So welcome. Thank you for joining us and congratulations on your new book. Can you tell us what the inspiration was?
You know, I've been in Japan since 1990. That's a long time, and I've never encountered them and nobody told me about them. And now suddenly I'm in Hokkaido and they are telling me, hey, we have these indigenous people, and actually met with them and visited with them and went to their reservations and all that. And I was very intrigued, like, why are they completely hidden, from the Japanese population? And that started me going, again, my writing back and saying, hey, this could be a nice storyline, and that's when it began. And, so that was around about maybe 4 years ago, right? When I get back to my hotel room, I'll spend an hour or so just writing something out, and it sort of evolved in a way where, for Hard Rock, where I was working then, Hokkaido sort of, as you knew, become a focus for us. And I started to, inject in an IR element into the whole story, and it grew and it grew, and it grew to the extent that, wow, I went, further than I've ever been. Like I went almost 30 chapters. And it grew on my mind that, hey, this could even become part of, the whole story or strategy of the company that we could put forward. How nice would it be when we finally submit our pitch and it comes along with the novel about, Hokkaido? And that was something that was running in my head. Of course, finally it did not go that way. And things got really busy. So, I left it alone for like months and months, in between, until I finally took my sabbatical a couple of years back. And then with COVID, wow, lots and lots of time on my hands, and I finished it, and so there you are. I'm pretty proud about it that the finished book sort of has a focus on diversity and minority people, with what's happened in the US and even in Europe. I think that's a big thing.
Obviously, this was a fictional work, but for our viewers, it's about some minority people who are opposed to IR development. If we take it back now to the real world, I mean, obviously, this has been a big thing in Japan when it comes to IR development, is public opposition. Have you seen any signs of any change in public opinion in Japan?
Public opinion has always been consistent, right? The Japanese, the men on the street, there are only two camps, basically. One camp is completely against it, and that's a big majority. I think the national average is around about maybe 60-odd%, right? And then the second biggest group are those who are nonchalant. I mean, they don't really care, right? Whatever you want to do whatever you want to do. That's actually how most Japanese feel. The same as how most Japanese feel about politics. They just want to get on with their life, their jobs, get their salary. They don't go to the polls when elections come, right? And then there's a very small group, which is the industries and people like us who are the investors that are more bullish for it. But that's a very, very small minority, right? That has not changed. For the last 10, 20 years, it's always the same.
Interesting. Well, it seems to be, the legislation seems to have been creeping along at a painfully slow rate. There's been a few developments recently. What do you think of the pace of things? Is it more or less what you expected, or?
Well, it's slower than we expect, obviously because of the coronavirus. That has really put the brakes on things because now Japan is completely shut as far as internationally is concerned, right? So, if you're going to bid for something that's going to cost billions of dollars, you're not going to do it remotely. I mean, it's uncanny, right? With so much money at stake, are you going to just have Zoom calls to plan your bid and talk to government officials and talk to your local partners? It's just not practical, but then saying that, the government is still going ahead with it. But there's still quite a number of obstacles down the road, which everyone can see, right? There are elections coming up that's going to figure a lot. You have an Olympics hanging in the air. That's one event that is going to have some sort of reverberation on how things pan out in the IR as well, because everything's tied to politics, right? So if the politics changes, if the dynamics changes, all things change, right? And the biggest question of all is, of course, will we still see the same prime minister in October? When they want to start making their set date, right? But saying all that, I think it's not all negativity, because when all is said and done, Japan is still a very, very good market, especially with the fact that now, Macau is not really returning to normal, even though they've been opening up. The GGR numbers are not coming in, and that's the hand of the Chinese government, tightening a lot on the flow of money and the grey market and all that. So with that, now Japan becomes sort of even more important, and it's going to do well. Don't expect it to be a Singapore or Macau, but it's still going to put Las Vegas to shame.
So given the pandemic and what's been seen as less than optimal regulatory requirements, you just mentioned tax rates and some of the restrictions, is Japan still going to get these world-beating IRs with billions, tens of billions of dollars in investments?
It's hard to say. It depends on how rigorous those regulations are, because if you look at all the other Asian jurisdictions, all of them claim that they are, very strict against money laundering. They comply to all the AMLA, international regulations and all that, but, not everyone is equal, right? When you compare a Philippines to a Macau to Singapore, it's vastly different. So how is Japan going to enforce that, right? Especially the fact that they are new jurisdictions, right? So if the junkets do slip in or get around the regulations, if you will, and they do in every country, even here in Singapore, right? Nothing is airtight. Then it actually contributes to a better GDR, right? But if the Japanese are very, very strict and you really see zero junkets, the hardcore junkets, then the numbers are going to be more normal. I think in the beginning, it might not even hit Singapore, because the tax rates are very high, and there's withholding tax for the locals, and there's very serious restrictions for locals entering the casino, more so than Singapore, even though their entry fee is lower, but then they are restricted by the number of times they can visit the casino in a week and in a month, so on and so forth. So that might be challenging. And in truth, the Japanese market has not been tested yet as far as casino gaming is concerned, because if you look at their current gambling market, which is the Chinko, these are electronic gaming machines, right? So more similar to our slot machines in casino. So will the Japanese population be more slot players or card game players? And as we know, to have big GGR, it's all in the table games, and it's all basically baccarat, right? So if the Japanese prove to not really, grow on baccarat, then the local portion of the income may not be that high, and you have to depend a lot on, foreign players, which essentially are still the mainland Chinese players, right? So it's still up in the air. We had that same question 15 years ago when Singapore was planning the IR, no one really knew what the GGR was going to be. Personally, I was wrong. I projected something lower, and it became higher than even the highest expectations by the investment analysts, right? So for Japan, it will be the same thing. I think no one can say for sure until when the door really opens and you see the first 6 months of the job.
So interesting, you brought up pachinko, and I think the regulations that we just published made clear that there will not be any pachinko products in the casinos. You don't think any of those pachinko players would migrate to the casinos to play slots?
So that's my opinion. My opinion is no, because if you visit many of the pachinko parlors, their demographics are more working class than anything, right? And working class are not really high contributors to casinos anywhere in the world.
In terms of going back to the jurisdictions again, obviously quite a few of the big US names have pulled out. Osaka has just been left with one bidder, and there's still quite a few in the running for Yokohama and the regional city, whichever that ends up being. Firstly, which one do you think it will be of the regional cities? And do you think it's optimal for Osaka just to basically only have one suitor? Should they perhaps think about dropping out at this time, or should they just press ahead?
If it was my decision, I'll put everything on ice and wait till the pandemic boils over. But that's not going to happen. I think the Japanese government have demonstrated that they are going forward no matter what. And so in this no matter what situation, then they got to do what they think is best in the situation. It's not ideal. So as you said, one bidder, the bidder is going to have a lot of bargaining power. I mean, the fact that Sands bailout was already a big red warning sign, and we thought they might, put a stop or pause to it when that happened, but they didn't.
You've been watching Asia Gaming Brief's face-to-face series. Please join us again for our chats with leading executives in Asia's gambling industry.